I was 3 seconds away from closing the biggest negotiation of my career when the screen went black. It wasn't a power outage. I spun around in my chair to find my mother, Cynthia, standing there with my computer's power cord dangling from her hand like a dead snake. Next to her, my brother Caleb was grinning, clutching a cheap neon sign that read Caleb TV. My mother didn't even blink. She just pointed at the door and said, "We need this outlet for your brother's brand. You can do your little typing thing in the basement. Before I tell you what happened when the lights went out, drop a comment. What is the one line a family member said to you that finally made you walk away? I want to know. I'm not the only one." I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just stared at my reflection in the dead monitor, watching the ghost of a $50,000 contract dissolve into the black screen. My name is Nicole. I am 29 years old, and I manage high-stakes crises for Fortune 500 companies remotely. I fix disasters for a living, but looking at my mother's smug face and my brother's childish grin, I realized I had made the fatal mistake of trying to manage the disaster that was my own family. "Okay," I said. The word was soft, almost a whisper. Cynthia blinked, her grip on the power cord loosening slightly. She had braced herself for a fight, for tears, for the usual pleading that gave her such a rush of power. She didn't know what to do with my silence. Caleb just snickered, plugging in his neon sign where my workstation had been seconds ago. "Have fun in the dungeon," he said, turning his back to me to adjust his ring light. "Don't trip on the stairs." I stood up. I didn't look at the basement door. I didn't look at the mess of cables they had created. I walked over to my desk, unplugged my laptop, and slid it into my leather bag. I grabbed my external hard drives, my passport, and the single folder of documents I had kept in the top drawer for exactly this moment. "Where are you going?" Cynthia asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. "The basement is that way." "I know where the basement is," I said. I walked past her, my heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor. I reached the front door and opened it. The evening air rushed in, cool and biting, tasting like freedom. "Nicole," she barked, "don't you dare walk out of here. If you leave, don't expect dinner waiting for you." I didn't look back. I stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind me. The click of the latch was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I didn't call a friend to crash on a couch. I didn't wander aimlessly. I hailed a ride and gave the driver an address in the financial district. 20 minutes later, I was standing in the lobby of a glass and steel high-rise, tapping a keycard against the scanner. The elevator whisked me up to the 30th floor in silence. I unlocked door 30B and stepped inside. The apartment was sparse, smelling of fresh paint and possibilities. There was no basement here. No neon signs. No screaming. I had signed the lease 2 weeks ago, a secret safety net I had prayed I wouldn't need but prepared for anyway. It was sleek, modern, and terrifyingly expensive. But as I locked the heavy steel door behind me and engaged the deadbolt, the price didn't matter. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out at the city grid below. Somewhere in the distance, in a cramped house in the suburbs, my mother and brother were likely laughing, thinking I was driving around the block to cool off. They thought they had won. They thought they had banished me to the dark so they could shine. They had no idea that I hadn't just left the room. I had left the building, and I had taken the foundation with me. I sat on the floor of my new living room, the hardwood cool beneath my legs. It was quiet, not the heavy, loaded silence of my mother's house, where the air always felt like it was holding its breath before a scream, but a real, empty silence. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim light, casting long shadows against the bare walls. I didn't open my work email or check social media. I opened a spreadsheet I had named, simply, the ledger. For years, I had treated this document like a secret diary, a place to vent my frustration in numbers instead of words. But tonight, looking at the totals, it didn't look like frustration. It looked like an indictment. I scrolled to the top. The mortgage was the first line item. $35,000 a year. 3 years ago, Cynthia had wept at the kitchen table, clutching a foreclosure notice, telling me that we were going to lose the family home because of administrative errors with her pension. She needed a co-signer to refinance. Just a signature, she had promised. Just a formality. But the formality turned into me paying the monthly note while she spent her income on appearances. I had bought the roof over the head of the woman who had just kicked me into the basement. I scrolled down. Caleb's stream setup. $5,000. Financed in my name because his credit score was non-existent. The camera, the custom-built PC, the ergonomic chair that was nicer than the one they had just sold out from under me. Even that neon sign he was holding like a trophy. I owned all of it. I was the silent investor in an enterprise that produced nothing but noise and entitlement. Then there were the medical bills. Thousands of dollars transferred to Cynthia for specialists and treatments that never seemed to result in a diagnosis or a prescription bottle. I knew, deep down, that those payments were actually going to online casinos and flash sales, covering the debts of a woman who needed to feel wealthy more than she needed to be honest. I stared at the bottom line. The sum was staggering. But what hit me harder was the psychology behind it. I used to wonder how they could treat me like a servant when I was the one keeping the lights on. How could Caleb mock my job when my job paid for his hobby? How could Cynthia look down on me from a pedestal I had built for her? And then, looking at the numbers, it finally clicked. It is a specific kind of madness, the delusion of power that comes from an empty wallet. Cynthia and Caleb didn't see the money as a gift. They didn't see it as a lifeline. They saw it as tribute. In their minds, their status as mother and golden child was an intrinsic quality, a divine right that superseded economics. They believed they held the power because of who they were, and I paid the bills because of who I wasn't. They thought I was paying for the privilege of being in their orbit. They mistook my compliance for submission. They thought my generosity was a tax I was legally obligated to pay to exist in their world. They had built a castle on a foundation of my guilt, completely forgetting that I was the one pouring the concrete. They thought their power was real. They didn't realize it was a subscription service. I closed the laptop. The blue light vanished, leaving me in the peaceful dark of an apartment that was paid for, secure, and solely mine. They thought they had evicted me. They didn't understand that when you evict the bank, you don't get to keep the house. I wasn't just a daughter or a sister anymore. I was a creditor. And the bank was officially closed. I woke up to sunlight, not the thin gray light that used to filter through the blinds in my old bedroom, but bright, unrestricted morning sun flooding through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new apartment. For the first time in years, I hadn't woken up to the sound of slamming doors or Cynthia shouting about a missing hairdryer. It was silent. It was peaceful. And then, my phone vibrated against the nightstand. I rolled over and picked it up. It was 8:15 in the morning. The notification screen was stacked with messages, but not a single one of them asked where I was. Not one asked if I was safe. Mom. The internet is lagging. Caleb can't stream. Reset the router. Mom. Nicole? Are you sleeping? Fix it. He has a collab in 10 minutes. I stared at the screen, letting the words sink in. She didn't realize I was gone. She genuinely thought I was downstairs in the damp, unfinished basement, sulking on a pile of laundry, waiting for her command to come back up and serve the family. In her mind, I wasn't a person who had walked out. I was an appliance that was temporarily malfunctioning. Then came the notification from Instagram. Caleb TV mentioned you in their story. I tapped it. The video filled my screen. It was Caleb, sitting in my old office, his new studio bathed in the purple glow of the ring light I had paid for. He was wearing a headset I had bought him for Christmas. He looked into the camera, doing that fake, overly energetic influencer laugh. Yo, guys. Sorry for the lag, he said, rolling his eyes theatrically. We're dealing with some technical difficulties this morning. You know how it is when you have jealous people in your life who just can't handle the grind. Some people would rather drag you down to the basement than see you shine. He winked at the camera. But we don't let the haters stop the stream. Big things coming. Stay tuned. I watched it twice. Jealous. He thought I was jealous. He thought I was sitting 10 feet beneath him, seething with envy over his 32 viewers and his neon sign, desperate to sabotage his rise to stardom. He didn't understand that I wasn't the hater in the basement. I was the CEO of the infrastructure he was standing on. They weren't worried. They weren't sorry. They were arrogant. They were so deeply entrenched in the delusion that I needed them that my existence revolved around their approval that the thought of me actually leaving hadn't even crossed their minds. They thought the silence from the basement was submission. I set the phone down on the marble countertop. A cold, sharp clarity washed over me, displacing the last lingering shreds of guilt. I had been worried about them. I had spent half the night wondering if I was being too harsh, if I should have left a note, if they would be okay. But they were fine. They were better than fine. They were thriving on the drama, using my punishment as content for their narrative. They didn't want a sister or a daughter. They wanted a tech support ticket. They wanted a punching bag. Okay, I said to the empty room. If they wanted to treat me like a service provider, I would act like one. And when a client stops paying and starts abusing the staff, you don't argue with them. You don't try to reason with them. You terminate the contract. I sat at my kitchen island, a cup of black coffee steaming next to my laptop. In my professional life, when a client refuses to pay and breaches the contract, we don't send angry texts. We don't negotiate with terrorists. We simply initiate asset recovery. I opened the browser. My fingers didn't tremble. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clinical. I was a surgeon cutting out necrotic tissue. First, The internet provider. The account was in my name. I didn't need to hack anything or guess a password. I owned the infrastructure. I navigated to the Service Management tab. There was a button at the bottom of the page, red and inviting. Terminate service. I clicked it. Effective immediately. Next, the power company. I couldn't cut it instantly. I wasn't a monster. And there were laws about that, but I could schedule a disconnect. I filled out the digital form, attached a copy of my lease termination for the old address, and set the date for 48 hours out. It was a courtesy notice. A 2-day warning to find a new host for their parasitic lifestyle. Then came the kill shot. I opened the financing portal for the high-end electronics store where I had purchased Caleb's entire career. The $5,000 PC, the dual monitors, the camera, the microphone, even the ergonomic chair Mom had sold. I had refinanced and replaced it all under a buy now pay later contract in my name. There was a clause in the fine print called voluntary surrender. It allowed the debtor me to return the collateral to settle the balance if payments couldn't be made. I initiated the request. I marked the location of the assets. 2408 Oak Street. Living room. Studio. I checked the box for expedited recovery. I closed the tabs. The administrative work was done. Now, I just had to watch the execution. I pulled up Twitch on my second monitor. Caleb was live. He was in the middle of a Call of Duty match, screaming at a teammate through his headset. The neon Caleb TV sign buzzed behind him, bathing the room in a sickly purple light. The chat was scrolling fast, mostly bots and a few teenagers egging him on. "Bro, lag again," he shouted, slamming his fist onto the desk. "This internet is trash. My sister messed with the router before she left. I swear, she's such a psycho." He paused, tilting his head. A sound cut through his stream audio, the sharp, insistent chime of the doorbell. "Hang on, chat," he muttered, pulling off his headset. "Probably pizza." He disappeared from the frame. The camera stayed focused on the empty chair, the expensive, leather-backed throne I was still paying for. I took a sip of my coffee. Muffled voices drifted in from the hallway. First confused, then rising in pitch. "What do you mean? Repossession?" Caleb's voice cracked. "My mom bought this. You can't take it." A deeper voice responded, calm and bored. "Financing agreement is in the name of Nicole. She authorized surrender of the assets. Step aside, sir." Caleb burst back into the frame, his face pale, phone in hand. "Mom! Mom! There's guys here. They're taking the setup." 2 men in blue jumpsuits walked into the shot. They didn't care about the live stream. They didn't care about his brand. One of them unplugged the PC tower. The stream froze for a second, then jittered back to life as the backup connection kicked in. The other man started dismantling the ring light. "You can't do this!" Caleb screamed, grabbing the monitor. "I'm live! I have 300 viewers!" "Let go of the monitor, sir," the repo man said, not even looking up. Cynthia appeared in the doorway, her hair in rollers, clutching her robe. "Who sent you?" "I'll call the police." "This is harassment." "Call 'em," the man said, lifting the tower effortlessly. "Paperwork is digital. It's all legal." Caleb looked at the camera, his eyes wide with genuine, unfiltered panic. For the first time, he wasn't performing. He was realizing that the magic box that gave him his identity was actually just a pile of plastic and metal that belonged to someone else. "Nicole," he whispered, looking directly into the lens. "Nicole, stop it." The repo man reached for the webcam. The screen went black. I closed the laptop and let the silence settle. I felt no guilt, only relief. The threat was gone. I poured a glass of wine in my secured high-rise apartment, certain they couldn't reach me here. Then the pounding started. "Police, open the door." Before I could react, officers forced their way in, cuffed me, and accused me of fleeing a burglary and theft reported at my mother's house. Caleb had called 911. He claimed I assaulted our mother and stole his equipment. I realized then this wasn't anger, it was escalation. To them, my boundaries were theft. Losing access to my money felt like abuse. I asked the officer to check my phone. The financing contracts, receipts, and surrender confirmation were all in my name. The certainty in the room cracked. They uncuffed me. Then my phone rang. My mother. On speaker, she demanded to know if I'd been arrested. Caleb shouted about his computer. The officer took the phone and informed them they had filed a false police report, a felony. A unit was being dispatched to their home. When the officers left, the silence returned, but this time it was final. Caleb's influencer dreams died with a criminal record and probation. My mother lost the house within months when my financial support vanished. I didn't destroy them. I stopped holding them up. Standing on my balcony now, I block their numbers not out of anger, but because my peace is too valuable to give away for free. If you've ever realized you were just a wallet to people who'd ruin you without hesitation, what was your moment?